Hello out there in podcast land. Welcome to the Game or Die podcast. The website is gameordie.net, and you can find me on Twitter at themadman007. I am your host, Ryan Moore. All right, welcome to the next episode 11 of the Game or Die podcast. I am, of course, your host, Ryan Moore, and I'm going to be talking about a few games that I've been playing. I finished a couple of them up. I stopped playing some of them, so I'm just going to get right into it because I got a lot of stuff to talk about. First thing that I'm going to talk about is Ultimate Alliance 3. It came out on the Switch a few weeks ago, and man, I really wanted to like this game, and I did for the most part. I do think there was a lot of big issues. I got prepared by playing Ultimate Alliance 1 and also replaying the X-Men Legends games as well in the last few months. And I've really liked them. They're big, they're open-ended, you can swap out characters, and they have these grand, amazing storylines, really well acted and written, and they're phenomenal games, especially co-op. So when I came to Ultimate Alliance 3, I was expecting kind of at least more of the same. And what the final product is not that at all. It's a very slimmed down game. It is bare bones game. Especially for $60, it feels kind of like a slap in the face. I think when they pushed this game out, they did so because of the movies. I like Thanos. I always have. I love the Infinity Gauntlet story, but man, I'm sick to death of it. I don't want to see that story in video games anymore. Heck, we just had the Infinity Gauntlet story in, what was the fighting game Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite? Infinity Gauntlet. So it's... we've had Infinity Gauntlet stories in video games since Super Nintendo. Go look at the War of the Gems on Super Nintendo. It's an Infinity Gauntlet story. You fight Thanos at the end of Nebula. It is... It's been played out, and I'm sick to death of it. I don't want to see that story. And with Ultimate Alliance, it's literally the same exact story, except for some few changes here and there, but large in part, it is the Infinity Stones, or the gems, I like to call them, because that's what they are. And you are trying to find the Infinity Gems, and Thanos is going to get the gauntlet and, put them all together and, wipe out half the Earth or cause mass destruction and all that fun stuff. So basically, this game starts out with Guardians of the Galaxy, which is actually pretty cool because I really like those films. I think they're the best out of all of the Marvel movies. But again, I don't want to see just the movies played out in a video game form. I want to see new stuff, and I don't feel like this game adds to that at all. The storyline is just bad. It's poorly written. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It jumps from, set piece to set piece, level to level, area to area. And in that area, guess what? You're going to find the characters that are associated with those areas. You go to the X-Mansion, who shows up? The X-Men. You go to Wakanda, guess who shows up? Black Panther and and Storm, and it feels weird and disjointed. It feels like there was probably about 5 or 6 teams that were all working separately and just had their own level, and that's all they spent time doing, is just spending time on their level. And then someone just kind of glued all of them together to make this cohesive story, but I don't think it works very well. I think it was actually really easy to get into, though. It's a kind of a jump-in co-op gameplay style, action adventure, or not even action adventure, action button mashing, and the powers are pretty cool, but the effects on screen, the way the camera works is just, it's weird. You lose your character a lot in the actual game itself. Like on screen, there's so much happening, so much obscuring your characters because of particle effects and waves and, just effects filling the screen. 99% of the time, you can barely make out where your character is. They highlight them in different colors to make it a little bit easier, but the way the camera moves, how far it's pulled back, you lose a lot of what's happening on screen. And that's a big distraction, like I love, effects in games when they're done right, but I don't think it does it very well here. And man, the Switch is not the right platform for this game. Right out of the gate, 5 minutes in, I saw slowdown, lag, dropped frames, and it continues on throughout the entire game. It becomes less noticeable as the game progresses because you just kind of get used to it, but it happens throughout the game. This system is not powerful enough to make games look and run well. It is a game or a system designed for indie platformers from 2014. That is what the Switch does well. It is not, and I played it docked, and the docked version, or playing it docked should allow for a little bit more power to be used and things like that. It's upsetting, to say the least, to see this game or the system that was designed to be portable but used in a console-like setting, and it underperforms from the get-go. Day one, launch day, when we booted up Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, this game, or the system, was not powerful enough for even their game that day, launch day. Breath of the Wild performs horribly in like Kakariko Village. Like, really? Kakariko Village, the biggest known village of all of the Zelda franchise, and when you get there, it just drops in frames. It's upsetting, I don't like the Switch at all. I think it's a bad system. I think there are fringe cases where it could be a good system, and something like Animal Crossing, which is kind of a get up and go, it's not a powerhouse of a game, that lends itself perfectly to that game. Or the Pokemon game, it's not graphically intensive, and there's not a ton of stuff happening all the time on screen. So you don't have to worry about the performance issues and stuff. But action games, where Wolverine is slashing the storms, lighting the claws on, his adamantium bones, and, all this stuff, and, Hawkeye's shooting his arrows, and Scarlet Witch is throwing her orbs and stuff. It underperforms. And it's such a bummer because the game looks insanely cool. I actually like the art style of this. I think the black outlines of cartoon style cell shading works really, really well for the game. But it's so weird because there's difficulty spikes in this game that show up out of nowhere. And I had a real big issue with this. There was 2 times in particular. My wife and I started playing, and we were in Wakanda, and there's this one part, and I never died in the game. I've had heroes fall down, but you can resurrect them and stuff like that. So I never died in the game up until this point. And we're playing through the game, and co-ops are really, really fun. But we get to this point where there's snipers, and they one-shot kill us. And there's no way, and you can only resurrect your character like 3 times. Or you have 3 chances to resurrect your group. And so all our heroes go down. We spend a couple seconds trying to revive people, and then they instantly go down again, or the person trying to revive gets shot and goes down. And we retried this about 5 or 6 times at least. And then we had to deal with some stuff, and we were like, you know what, let's take a break. Let's go have dinner and stuff like that. We'll come back to it later. So we didn't get around to it later that evening. So I came back to it the next day, and I picked it up and just ran past those characters. And I was able to progress by myself. But trying to fight those characters, I was properly leveled too. Your character levels up and stuff like that, and there's just random difficulty spikes where I wouldn't die throughout the entire game, but then one area gave me so much of a hard time that it made it really difficult to want to keep playing. It seemed unfair, and I hate using that phrase when talking about video games because most of the time it's your skill. You need to get better at these games. You need to progress in your skills and hone your skills to be find maybe a new tactic or level up to the appropriate level or whatever. But this game has difficulty spikes that make no sense whatsoever. And this is my prime example. There's Thanos has his cronies, basically, his little group of underlings, about 5, I believe. Can't remember. I don't remember their names because I don't even think they say their names in the game. And I think 1 or 2 of them show up in the movies, but that's about it. So I was playing the end part of the game where, you have all the Infinity Stones and they get taken away from you. And then Thanos distributes, for whatever reason, doesn't really make sense. He distributes the Infinity Stones to his underlings, his lieutenants or whatever you want to call them. And you go through and fight every single one. And I killed every single one of them, except for the middle guy. I killed 2 or 3. And then one guy comes up and I die. Game over. Restart from checkpoint. And I go, okay, maybe, fluke. I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't reviving people fast enough or whatever. I was just being sloppy. It's the end of the game. I'm kind of getting a little sloppy. So I play it again and I die. And then I restart it, play it again, I die. Over and over and over again. I did it 5 or 6 times, and I got really frustrated because I was like, man, that Wakanda part and this part are the only times I've died in this game. Everything else has been a breeze. And I finally get through that part. I beat that character, I take the stone, I get to the next spot, and I fly through that boss. And then I get to Thanos. And Thanos, he's the big bad of the game. He is the bad guy. And I beat Thanos first try without even paying attention. I was having a conversation with my wife. We're talking about, dinner or something like that. And what are we going to cook or whatever? And I'm just not even really paying attention to the boss fight. And I just decimate him. So it was really weird to be able to get through one of the final bosses in the game instantaneously without even really putting in effort. Yet one of the lieutenants, one of the people who are supposed to be less powerful than the bad guy, gave me the hardest time in the entire game. And it makes no sense. There's just random difficulty spikes. The other thing with the game is it's very basic. It is so bare bones. Like I said, it's like a slap in the face while playing it. It's like, man, really? I paid $60 and this is all you're giving me? The story of this game is the Infinity Gauntlet story. Okay. But it combines all these characters, of all the different Marvel universe stuff. You're dealing with the Guardians of the Galaxy. You're dealing with the Defenders. So you have Iron Fist and Luke Cage and, Jessica Jones and all that stuff. And then you go to the X-Mansion, you deal with the X-Men, you deal with, the Inhumans, I believe. People like Medusa and Black Bolt. I remember them from Ultimate Alliance 1, but I know that they've been pushing hard on a TV show and stuff like that, which I like. I think Black Bolt's an interesting character, and I wish they would have delved deeper into that stuff. And this is where I have an issue with this game. It doesn't delve deep into anything. It is scratch a surface level understanding and saying, hey, this is a character from that TV show, remember? All right, cool, bye. And they don't delve deep into it. They don't give you time to breathe and really soak in these characters. You're just off to the next thing. Like the Inhumans level, I think is maybe 5 minutes long, if that. You just get there and then you're immediately gone. And you don't deal with any of these characters on a personal level. You just have a brief sentence or two to talk to them, and then you're off to the next thing, which is what Ultimate Alliance, the originals, and X-Men Legends didn't do. They opened up the world. They gave you hub worlds to go around, talk to everyone, and explore and hang out and do trivia. Like in the little computer kiosk, you can do trivia games and you could do fetch quests and things like that. And this game has none of that at all. It is so upsetting that they just, this is basically the issue I had with Final Fantasy 13. It's a corridor game. It is a hallway simulator. You're just walking through these little hallway areas. It is so linear, you cannot deviate at all. And it's just boring. That's what this game is in its core, is boring. I really enjoyed playing the game because I had nothing else better to do with my time. I did not want to get into a deep, crazy first-person shooter or, some action-adventure game. I was still trying to play through Lords of Shadow 2, and I just couldn't do it. I don't know if I'll ever finish that game. I want to be able to say I finished it, but it's just so boring compared to the other games. And this game is the same way. It's a very short game. I think I completed it in about 10 hours or so. And it is just go to the next cutscene, walk straight, fight a couple guys, go to the next cutscene, walk straight. There is no deviation. You can explore a tiny, tiny bit and hit walls to hope that maybe there's a secret panel or something, but it is not the same game as Ultimate Alliance 1 or 2. It is not like X-Men Legends at all, except for it is a button masher brawler. So it's fun. I enjoyed my time with it, but man, I don't think I'll ever, ever, ever load that game up for the rest of my life. I just don't see the need to. I don't see the point. And what's really upsetting too is they put in these super convoluted systems and mechanics into the back-end system of the game. You have these crystals called ISO 8. ISO 8, and these will allow passive buffs and debuffs and things like that. And so you collect these crystals, these color-coded crystals, and you can apply them to slots. You only have 3, I think you have 3 or 4 slots throughout the for each character in the game. And it's just it's inventory management. It's spending time in menus you don't need to for very, very, very little buffs. 5% health regeneration or 5% more damage. 5% is nothing when you are spamming the X button or Y button or whatever you want to call it with the Nintendo controllers, and you are dealing thousands of points of damage within, 2 seconds. What's 5%? Nothing. It's pointless. To take down an enemy is 3 seconds at most for most of the characters. Why would I care about 2.9 seconds instead of 3 seconds to kill a character? It's pointless. And then they have these time rips or tears, kind of like in BioShock Infinite. And if you find them, you can basically exit the game and load into these danger room scenarios, which is cool. The other games did that too, but they're just challenges, and all you get is more items, to manage. And it's just, I think there is different costumes that you can get if you do all of them and you complete certain requirements and stuff like that. But it just, Ultimate Alliance 3 was such a letdown in every single category. I had fun with it. I think it's a fun game. If that game was $20, dude, I would totally recommend it to anyone. But for $60 and how poorly it performs and how bland and boring it is not worth it at all. I'm bummed at this point that I spent that much money on that game. But it's a Nintendo game. What are you going to do? It's Nintendo produced. That game wouldn't have come out if Nintendo didn't produce it, kind of like Bayonetta. And so it's only going to be on the Switch. It will never come out, as far as I know, to any other platforms. And, well, sucks to be us because it sucks at performing, like performance-wise. And so it's just boring. Blazing Chrome, just to switch topics here, is basically, I started it because I saw people like just losing their minds over it. It's basically Contra. It is 100% Contra. And I'm not a big Contra fan. I think they're okay games, but they require an extra person. And I don't have that usually. And sometimes, if I want to, I'll play with my wife if she's into the game, but she's not really into into those types of games, like just run and gun shooters or anything like that. So I'm never going to be able to play Blazing Chromes with another person, really. And it's Contra hardcore. Like, it is so insanely Contra hardcore that it is kind of laughable, because it's like, you literally just ripped this game off. But that game's not being made. Konami's not going to make that game, so why not have someone else make those types of games? They're cool. They're rad looking. But I played the first part, and I had a difficult time. I'm not good at those types of games. I don't have the patience for them either to be able to memorize every single enemy placement. I just don't care. So I got to the second level, and I got to the boss like 7 times, and you have X amount of continues before you game over, and then you have to restart the entire level over again. And those levels are long. They're not super, super easy breeze through levels. And I restarted. I probably spent about maybe an hour and a half trying to get through the second level on my own, and I just couldn't do it. So I stopped playing. It's cool, but, it's just a game that I don't find myself ever going back to again. I just won't. So I played through those, and then I started watching some movies, just to kind of cleanse my palate of video games for a while. And there was a show called The Movies. It's produced by CNN, executive produced by Tom Hanks. And it's kind of cool. It's kind of what they'll do is they'll take a decade in movie or cinema history. So the first episode is the 80s. Second episode is the 90s. The third episode is the 2000s through today. And they talk about movies, and they have a lot of famous actors and directors talking about the influences of these movies that came out and why they're so good or so relevant or so interesting. But it's kind of like a best of compilation, because they talk a little bit about it and then they move on to the next thing. The episodes are like an hour, maybe an hour and 20 minutes or so, talking about every type of genre, action, horror, comedy, drama, animated, and it's really, really cool. But it's very basic. It's very bare bones. It's very, hey, you know what? Here, let's talk about these for, 2 minutes and then move on to the next movie. Let's talk about these for, 4 or 5 minutes, depending on what it is. And if it was really, really influential in society or whatever. And it's fun, but it does push an agenda, like hardcore pushing agenda at some points. And I was just eyes rolling in the back of my head like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe they're talking about how amazing this film is and how much it meant to a certain group of people and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, okay, I can see where people would think this is an important film for that time or whatever, but come on, like, we can see right through what you're doing. So it was fun. I also watched a movie called Batman Hush. Graphic novel that was one of my favorites. I think Hush is a really, really cool graphic novel. If you like comic books, if you like Batman, read Batman Hush Volumes 1 and 2. They're really, really cool. So DC has been on a point of pushing all their movies to their animated movies, making them from graphic novels, which I always said was what they should do with the live action versions too. The animated versions is a little bit different. And the reason why is because we already have these comic books that are drawn. An animated movie is just going to give us the same exact thing. Live action is something different. There's no way you can have the same exact look and feel for the entire movie if it's live action trying to be a comic book that's now turned into live action. Take a look at movies like Scott Pilgrim. They do good jobs emulating certain panels, but they're totally different movie versus comic and stuff like that. And so when you get to a comic adaptation or a animated adaptation of a comic book, you're just going to get the same drawings basically. And with DC, man, they knock them out with the least amount of effort I see in any studio. This movie feels like it was directed, written, and voice acted by robots. It's such a bummer because DC does a lot of good stuff, or they used to, but now everything they touch is just turning terrible. It is so bland. And they change some stuff up for not the better, but like I can see why they changed some of the stuff up. But the art style is very basic. It's very angularly drawn. There's not a lot of curves or creases. There's not a lot of detail in the faces or the environments. It just is, again, something to push out the door for whatever reason. And it looks very, very boring. It's also really extremely quickly paced, like bam, 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 bam. Next line, next line, next line. All right, moving on. Next line, next line, next line. Here's the plot point that we got to hit. All right, let's move on. Moving on, moving on, moving on. This movie does not give you time to breathe. It doesn't even give itself time to breathe. It doesn't give itself the time to let some of those scenes and some of that dialogue that was written really well in the comics and makes a poignant distinction of like, hey, this is an important time in this era or in Batman's and Catwoman's life or whatever it is. And everything comes off as either a joke or it comes off as not serious because they're just moving right on to the next thing. You know, this is where Batman takes off his cowl in front of Catwoman and says, hey, I'm Bruce Wayne. This is who I am. I know who you are and I love you and I want to be with you and I don't care what the consequences are for me revealing my identity. That's like a really big part in any Batman, mythos or movie or whatever you want to call it. And they just breeze right through it. Like it's not even a thing. Like, let's get to the sex scene. All right, cool. And moving on after that too. And it's just, it's such a depressing thing to watch the DC universe and their comics, their movies, their animated features just go the way of robots. Like it has no personality whatsoever. It's such a bummer. And they also changed some of from what I remember, I read this comic when it came out and I haven't gone back to it. I don't reread stuff all that often. So I didn't remember some of the stuff, but I remember it being different. And there are some different things and some stuff doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. They don't really touch on it. And it's just, again, it's another and it's gone type of thing. It's weird. So I watched that and then Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee came back on the new season on Netflix. And if you don't watch that show, watch it. It's so good. It is so good to just watch these comedians, hanging out, having some coffee, getting some food, and just enjoying each other's company and having fun conversations. They do one with Eddie Murphy, like that's the first episode of this new season, and that's a long one too, which is really cool. There's ones where he goes out and hangs out with like his producer and stuff like that, or Jamie Foxx, and it's a really fun show. It also makes me really always want to get They do these artistic, B-roll footage shots for filler to kind of intercut between the conversations and things like that and passage of time. And they make coffee look amazing. I hate coffee. I can't stand the taste. I don't like the smell of coffee, but man, this show makes me want to drink coffee on a regular. So if you don't watch it, go watch it. It's on Netflix, and there's a ton of seasons. Not every episode hits. There is 1 or 2 episodes that just feel lame, or, like this person really doesn't have all that much to say, or is a little weird. But hey, you know what? It's an episode TV. It's a lighthearted show. It's very fun. And the only bad thing I will say about it is the show itself the season is so short. We binge watched it in an evening, and we started kind of late, and we watched a few episodes. We got dinner. We watched a couple more, and then the season was over. I think it's like 7 or 8 episodes, maybe. And it was just a bummer when we were like, oh, that's it. Oh, what are we going to do for the rest of the night? So it's a cool show. The other, so I started getting back into gaming. I've been on the road a lot lately for work, and so I haven't really had energy to play games, a lot. So putting on a VR headset late at night is kind of a little bit rough, because you got to have energy to get all that stuff on and get into the world, and you got to concentrate, and you're moving around or walking around, and it's all motion activated. So I don't play a whole lot of VR lately, but I did get back into Fallout 4 VR. And I know a lot of people hate this game for whatever reason. I don't get it. I was not a big fan of the Fallout franchise to begin with. I played 3 when it came out, and I got really bored of it because it looked all brown and gray and green. Those are the only 3 colors in that game. And I also was like, I don't like post-apocalyptic settings. I liked Oblivion. I like Skyrim. But I don't like those post-apocalyptic settings. So Fallout 3 came and went for me. Fallout New Vegas came and went for me. And then Fallout 4 came, and I was like, you know what? I'll play it. I got nothing else better to do when it came out. I played it, and I loved it. I put like 80-something hours. I finished the story, which wasn't the best story in the world, but I enjoyed it. And so Fallout 4 VR is literally the same game, just with VR components in it. And I didn't really want to play that whole game again because I finished it like maybe a year prior. 80 hours for a game and then replaying it the next year seems too much for me personally. And nothing new is going to happen or whatever. So what I did is I imported my save, and I never got to play the DLC. So I went through and played the DLC. And there's some definite hiccups and technical issues. The game runs at 45 frames per second in VR, which is rough to say the least. And the DLC is not optimized, so you have to mod the crap out of it. You can't even technically play the DLC, even if you bought it, because DLC doesn't work in the VR versions, or you can't buy it. It's not installed, so you actually had to mod some of the files and INI files and things like that. Now you can actually just drag and drop in place, which makes it easier to install from the quote-unquote pancake version of that game, but it is still a process of some sort. And then on Nexus mods, where they do all the modding, the mod community, there's optimizations where they'll cut out certain textures and things like that, up-res other things, but it does not run great at all in VR. But it's still fun. Being inside that world, walking around, searching stuff, having characters talk to you, and being able to see the detail and 3D models of these, and being able to walk around and kind of see the innards of like the synths and like Nick and stuff like that is rad. So there's 2 main DLCs that I've been playing off and on for the last year or so. Far Harbor was the first one. I liked it, but I'm not a synth person. I'm not a robot person. Sci-fi stuff. It was also too dark. The whole environment is basically dark all the time. You're in this area where it's just covered in fog like 90% of the time. So I played through it, finally got through it, enjoyed what it was, but I was really excited for the DLC Nuka-Cola factory or whatever, the Nuka-Cola theme park. It's a theme park DLC. So you get to go through like fun houses and roller coasters and sets and theming, and it is insane. It is so cool. Even though it doesn't perform extremely great, there's some weird stuff going on graphically. The game itself, the DLC is beautifully crafted. It's really fun. The characters are fun and interesting. And just being in a theme park, in a post-apocalyptic world, and being able to see what life was like before and what life is now, it's really, really fun. I love it. So I played through those in VR. I'm still playing through Nuka-Cola. I haven't finished it, so maybe I'll talk a little bit more about it next episode. And then I was like, man, I just want a relaxing time. I was sitting down on a Saturday afternoon, and I was like, man, I just want to play something fun, light, breezy, easy, something I don't have to give my full attention to, something that I can just play. But I wanted to play VR, and so I was looking through the games that I have for VR, and I came across one I bought last year. It came out last January of 2018, and it was a handful of Keflings. Now, the Kefling games are basically resource building and management games, kind of like a very watered-down basic SimCity. I love those games. I'm not very good at them, but man, the Kefling games have grabbed me in no other way a game has. I wrote about it on the website, so go to gamerdie.net and look at my review of a handful of Keflings. I kind of retell the story of the Keflings and how I started playing it, but sum up a long story short. Every Christmas, I play a game or I try to start at Christmas Eve, play that game all night long. And I've been doing this since I was a kid, all night long. And Christmas morning, 7 or 8 o'clock, my parents would wake up and I would go down. And I've been doing this since I was a kid. And now as an adult, I still do it every once in a while, depending on, the season, what's happening with my life and things like that. And I play these games all night, no distractions, no breaking. And I just play through a game as much as I possibly can. So in 2008, I was living in Denver and I was alone. I didn't have any family in the state. And so I was like, man, I want to play a game. What am I going to play? And so I started scrolling through Xbox Live Arcade, and there was this game called Kingdom for Keflings. So I loaded it up and I got enthralled by it. I just was captivated by it. I was so excited to progress in this game, and it's very easy. The music is amazing, and I played this game for 17 hours straight, from Christmas Eve in the noon, afternoon time, all the way until Christmas morning, and I just was, I was so excited to play this game, and I finished the game in one sitting. And it's just a building game. There's what are called Keflings, which are these little humanoid people, and your avatar in the game basically is telling these Keflings what to do. You go chop wood. You mine for rocks. You mine for crystals. And then you start taking all those resources and building things out of them. You build buildings like a workshop that will create new blueprints for new buildings. You create a lumber mill so that the resources of the wood that's being chopped by one of the Keflings can go into the lumber mill, and that creates planks. And those planks then can create sconces, and those sconces can create other things. And you just kind of build and build and build and build until you build this kingdom and these castles. And it, like I said, it took a long time, like 17 hours basically, for me to start from nothing and to finish the end game. And there's no bad guys. There's nothing. It's not an RTS because there's no enemies. You just build. And it is a very light approach to this type of game. And you can just hang out and have fun. And so they have a VR version, and I was blown away by it. I was so excited by this VR version. So I started playing through the VR version, and it's a much shorter game. It's very different as well. It does something that VR does extremely well, which is dioramas. Toy-sized models in VR is incredible. Play or load up Google Earth VR and kind of go not to floor scale, but not Earth scale either, just kind of somewhere in the middle. And it looks like those little models in a model home when you go to like a new home track and you go into like the management building or whatever, and they have like a layout and like a toy train set almost and stuff like that. And it's just, there's a new feeling. There's a different feeling to that type of stuff. And a handful of Keflings does that really well. So you have this side-scrolling level, and it begins and ends. There's just a little bit of area to work with. And you build a Kefling house. 2 Keflings come out for each house. And you put them to work, and you just start building. And just like the other one, but the level layout's very, very different. And there's also a level cap of how many Keflings you can have. And that's where I kind of ran into a little bit of some problems. It just took a little bit of a while. There's a waiting period for some stuff where I just had to stop production on certain things, throw Keflings into a new job, a new area. I don't want you to cut wood anymore because we have enough wood. So I need you to now mine for crystals. And then those crystals need to be worked on by a witch to create a magic potion and blah, blah, blah. So it took about 6 hours to complete from beginning to end, 100%ed that. And I had the time of my life. I loved it so much. I'm thinking about wanting to just put a headset on and play it again, just because it's just so relaxing. So many games are so hell-bent on creating the most difficult thing to take up all your time and energy, learning all these rules and regulations, being able to navigate spaces, having these 45-minute long boss fights that if you die, you just got to restart it all over again. Tough luck. There's a time and place for brutal difficulty, insanity type of hard difficulty settings, but there's a time and place for fun, relaxing games, and there's not a whole lot of them. That's why I love the Kefling games. Try and find a game like Keflings. You can't. There is no other game like Keflings. Oh, there's a Kingdom of Fur Keflings, which was the first game, a World of Keflings, which was the second game, and then the third game, which is the VR version, a handful of Keflings. That's it. There are no more Kefling games. There are no more genres like the Kefling games. There's similar games, but it's not the exact same. So that's what I've been playing for the most part of the last couple of weeks. I'm going to try and maybe get some more gaming in this week as I finally have some time off from work, not traveling. So I'm very excited about that. And hopefully you guys liked listening to me talk about some games. If there's something that I talked about that interests you, go check it out. It's worth it. If you have a VR headset, man, a handful of Keflings is a very different style game that I'm pretty sure you guys are used to, but it's interesting. It's fun and relaxing. It is like a lazy river almost. You just sit in a tube and you just go. You just have fun. You just relax. If you want a little bit more hardcore, Fallout 4 VR is a really fun game. It's one of the better VR games that gets you immersed in a world, but unfortunately it does perform, even on an amazing computer, it has a lot of trouble keeping up the frame rates. So check that out. I would say stick with the main game unless you've already played it and you finished it and you want to do the DLC and you didn't on the pancake version. It's fun, but just be prepared to have some very underperforming specs and things like that. I'm going to try and get into maybe a new series of some sort for games. I don't think I'm going to play any more Castlevania type games. I don't think I'm going to be playing any more Marvel superhero games for a while. So I'm looking for my new thing to play. So until next time, thank you very much for listening to the Game or Die podcast. If you're still sticking with me, I also guested on my cousin's podcast, Scares Anonymous, with Andy Moore. And he goes through and talks with friends, family, and people who do scaring at themed events like Halloween Haunt and Universal Studios and stuff like that. During Halloween, they put on masks, they run around with chainsaws and things like that and scare a bunch of people. And they're all amazing people, and the mazes are really fun. I've always enjoyed them. So I don't know when that episode's going to come out. We just recorded it last night. But go search for Scares Anonymous if you want to have something just a little bit different to listen to that's really fun and enjoyable. So, Scares Anonymous with Andy Moore. I believe you can find it on iTunes and Android, Google Play Store, and things like that. But for me, my name is Ryan Moore. This is the Game or Die podcast. Go check out the website, gameordie.net, if you want to have some fun reading material along with this podcast. I'm doing reviews of games that I've been playing or movies that I've been watching or TV shows that I've been watching. And it's just a fun outlet for me to be able to be a little bit more creative and have some fun. So without further ado, I will talk to you next episode. Thank you very much.